Yeah, my name is Wendy Hoashi-Erhardt. I'm the plant breeder for raspberry and strawberry at Washington State University. And today I want to talk about some of the cultivar options for raspberries for Utah growers and home gardeners. There's a little bit of a lag here on my slides. I think it's working. Okay, I wanted to also just give an introduction. I was really interested in Sheridan's slide on chilling hours. And if you look at that map for the United States, the number of chilling hours that we get here in the Pacific Northwest, tucked up in Washington State and up on the Canadian border is actually, one of the highest in the country, over 3,000 chilling hours per year. And so that's significant. And the context under which we're breeding raspberries for the Pacific Northwest here in Washington State is quite unique and different from the raspberries that are grown in almost the whole rest of the United States. So this is kind of just like a geography lesson here. Where we breed for Washington State, Washington State is the second largest producer of raspberries in the United States. So raspberry breeding is a really important science for supporting the industry. Almost more than 90% of the raspberries in Washington State are grown within about 15 miles of Linden, right up within a couple miles of the Canadian border where that top circle is, where we have really mild temperatures that raspberries tend to perform well in. So it makes it a really important growing area for the US. And then the second place where raspberries are mainly grown in the Pacific Northwest are in Oregon, down where the second circle are in the Portland area and south in the Willamette Valley. So that's our context for breeding for and growing raspberries. In terms of Washington raspberry production, again, this is for context. We're averaging about 60 to 62 million pounds per year since 2015 up through 2020 or 2022. And then our industry is unique in that almost more than 90% of the raspberries that are grown go directly into processing or frozen product. That's contrasted with California, because California is the largest producer of raspberries, and they're producing about double the weight or volume of what the raspberries are in Washington. But they're produced almost all for fresh production. Okay, in terms of plant breeding objectives that we are working with, the picture here is of a typical machine harvester. We use a lot of mechanization in the Washington raspberry industry because we're growing a lot of raspberries over many acres, and we need that mechanization to be able to pick them quickly and efficiently over a short harvest season. So one of our main breeding objectives is to select raspberries that are suitable to machine harvesting. In addition, we're looking for high yields, significant fruit firmness and integrity, meaning how the fruit holds together. And then other quality traits like berry size, berry color, the flavor of the berry, soluble solids, which is the sugar content of the berry, and then also contrasting with the acid content of the berry that brings out that intense flavor that the Pacific Northwest berries are known for. We also breed for tolerance to major diseases that are present in the Pacific Northwest, namely Phytophthora root rot is a major one, which is a soil-borne disease, and then also viruses like raspberry bushy dwarf virus. And then because the end use of so much of our fruit is for processing, bulk frozen purees, juices, and also individually quick frozen fruit, we also test our varieties for their suitability and compatibility with those processing effects. Okay, switching more to production that's going to be relevant for Utah growers. There are two main methods of growing raspberries, and it depends on the varieties that you have available. So the first type that I'm going to talk about are called Floricane fruiting raspberries. Raspberry, as you know, is a perennial crop. Once raspberries are established, they will give fruit for 6 to 10 plus years if the planting is healthy and vigorous. After establishment, you need at least 2 more years before you're going to get a significant harvest off of that established planting. Raspberries are a biennial crop, meaning that in each given year, there are 2 ages of canes present in your field. So, and I depicted this with my drawing here, but the green canes are the first year canes. So those are canes that push up every spring from the roots and then form, they grow taller and taller into the canes that we're used to seeing. The second year canes are the first year canes that have then overwintered, become woody. And then in the second year, they will be the ones that produce the fruit. So for floricane, so those are called floricanes. The primary canes that come up the first year, the succulent green little suckers, those are called primocanes. And then the floricanes are the ones that are the second year canes that have overwintered and which will be the fruit bearing canes for that year. Those are called floricanes. With floricane fruiting varieties, there's some advantages to having them in your operation because fruiting tends to be earlier. The fruit will generally in Washington around July 1 is when we expect to see fruit. I understand that in Utah, you can often see fruit in late June, but usually it's in that June period or that July period as well. In terms of managing these canes in fields, for floricane fruiting varieties, every winter when the plants enter dormancy, the old canes, the woodier canes that produce fruit that year are removed. And then the new canes that have grown up are then trained and trellised to trellis wires to offer that support for them as they go through the winter and then enter their cropping season. Floricane fruiting varieties in the cold, arid regions like Utah tend to be quite susceptible to winter injury, where desiccating winds or very cold temperatures or fluctuating temperatures at the wrong times can damage the fruiting buds for both leaves, or will damage the buds in a way that reduces yield. And so that's a risk. For floricane fruiting varieties, the winter labor is also greater because it takes a bit longer to carefully remove the woody spent canes and to make room and to tie the new canes. The next method of growing raspberries is called with primocane fruiting varieties. It's still a perennial crop in that once you establish a planting, they'll continue to crop for many years. But in these types, the first year canes are the ones that bear fruit. So they will grow up from the soil in the spring, they will reach the wire and then begin to fruit on the tips of those canes. With these, because their fruiting develops a little bit later, the fruit begins more around the end of July and into August. But they also are kind of like an ever-bearing fruit. They will continue to flower and fruit for as long as that season will continue before first frost. So you can get fruit from July to August, September, and even into October if the weather holds for you. In the winter, the training and winter management is different. You have the option to remove all of the canes and basically mow your entire planting to a couple inches. And because there is no like above ground canes, they're not as susceptible to winter injury. So the buds are not hanging out in the air to be dried or to come in contact with those cold temperatures. And so primocane fruiting varieties are sometimes favored in those cold regions where winter conditions are somewhat unpredictable because the crown is largely protected from those cold events, and then you have a more reliable yield year over year. I want to say that a lot of the information that I will be presenting on today, I was able to glean from the excellent extension publications that are available for Utahns. And I want to draw your attention to this publication, Selecting Summer-Bearing Raspberry Cultivars for Northern Utah, that's available on the Utah State University. And some of the researchers who have presented today are authors on this paper. So you have a wealth of information available to you in Utah, and that's really great. So I'm going to be talking first about the Floricane varieties that are available for growing and even testing. And again, this is information that I took that I am borrowing and being able to share with you because of the extension publication that's available. And then we're just going to go from left to right and talk about specific varieties and their pros and cons. So on the left there is Canby. Canby is a cultivar that was developed in Oregon, and it's pretty widely used in Utah as a reliable Floricane fruiting selection or cultivar. It tends to give reliable yields, but they tend to be average yields. They're not super high. And winter cane injury tends to be moderate. It has performed well in consumer taste trials, so the flavor is good on Canby. And its susceptibility to raspberry horntail, which is a pest in Utah for raspberry, is also sort of medium. And again, this is widely grown in Utah as for the Floricane fruiting variety. So it is available in nurseries. I think there are Pacific Northwest nurseries that propagate plants of Canby that are available for purchase. Another variety that has performed well in Utah with a variety trial is Cascade Bounty. Bounty is a cultivar that we developed here at Washington State University. It's been high yielding and with low winter injury here in Utah. I would say that the fruit quality on Cascade Bounty is not the best. So there are probably better options out there for you. Cascade Bounty really performs well in root rot intensive fields. So I don't, I'd be interested to find out what your experience is with root rot. But here in Washington, root rot is a major economically important disease. And so Cascade Bounty can be a really reliable cultivar for those conditions. Again, this was developed for machine harvesting. So, it's really high yielding and able to be machined. But again, the flavor is not the best. The size is, small to medium. They tend to be quite soft. And so for a fresh market variety, I probably don't recommend it, but the plants are available if you're looking for juice or puree or just like big yields. And then the two other cultivars on this slide have performed well in Utah. So if you can find them, they're worth trialing and using on your farm. But as far as I can tell, they're not being propagated by nurseries that I could find. So I know that Cowichan is not being propagated. That was developed in British Columbia. And then Georgia, I believe, was a Maryland cultivar that I have never seen propagated. So they're not really available. So it's not particularly worth paying super high attention to. But if you can get your hands on them, might be good. Okay, the next three Floricane varieties that have been trialed here in Utah are all available at the nurseries. So they are options if you're looking for varieties to trial. Nova is a Floricane fruiting cultivar that's very high yielding, has good winter survival. Its size and firmness are decent. Its response to raspberry horntail pest did seem to be have a high susceptibility, so that would be something to be monitored and managed. Prelude, also high yielding, good winter survival on this variety. The fruit size is again medium, and it had moderate susceptibility to the horntail pest. Royalty is a cultivar that is large fruited, but it's also not a red raspberry technically. It's a purple fruited cultivar. So if you are, if this can fit into some sort of marketing scheme where you have niche crop, where you have that attraction, the purple contrasted with other red or yellow raspberries that you have, it can be very attractive in a farm stand. Very high yields on this one, excellent winter survival. Its flavor is not a traditional red raspberry flavor. It has some black raspberry in that flavor. And it tends to be fairly resistant to attack by the raspberry horntail. So This variety is widely available in several nurseries, so it can be a good option if you're looking for some novelty in the color department. The next few slides are going to be about Floricane fruiting cultivars that have been released since that extension publication was published. And so these are recommended based on their performance in other regions. So they're things that you would want to trial just a row of or a few plants of, as long as you can keep them labeled, identified, and be able to watch their performance compared to cultivars that you're used to. So these come, with cautionary recommendation. Again, we don't know the extent how well they would perform in a Utah climate. The first one I want to talk about is Cascade Harvest. We developed this at Washington State University. We released it in 2014. Floricane fruiting cultivar, it was developed for machine harvesting. Almost all of ours are for that purpose, but it's widely used for fresh production. I know several growers locally that produce it for fresh. It gives really high yields of attractive light red conic berries. So it's a really nice berry to look at, high yielding, it's tolerant to root rot, it is resistant to RBDV, the virus I was talking about. This is a mid-season cultivar. It crops about 2 to 3 days before meeker starts. The fruit is large, good flavor on this one. The chilling hours, we need at least 600 hours, which is pretty low, but that's what we've seen in a few other regions that have are on the edge a little bit in terms of getting adequate chilling hours, and they've found that 600 hours is good. The winter injury response, again, we're not getting intense episodes of winter injury conditions here in the Pacific Northwest. We do occasionally, and so we observe what winter injury has occurred for the cultivars that we are evaluating, but we don't, so we haven't heard negative feedback on this cultivar, but again, it would be something to test in a small area and see if it would work for you. These plants are available at Pacific Northwest nurseries. The second one I want to give a cautious recommendation for is Cascade Premier. This is a cultivar we released in 2018 from Washington State University. It's very high yielding, it's machine harvestable, and it was intended for the process market, but again, has high adaptability to fresh production. This is a very early season cultivar, one of the earliest ones that we test. The berries are really lovely, firm, large, really good flavored. This is a plant that's fairly tolerant to root rot. It does get cane botrytis under certain conditions, so that's something to monitor. I'm not sure if that's a disease that Utah raspberries tend to develop or if the conditions are right for that. Again, we haven't heard of a lot of feedback on winter injury, but in a few years where we had some cold events or some high wind events in susceptible times, this has performed well and we were seeing low winter injury. So that's another good option. Plants are available for this from Northwest Plant Company. And then I have 3 more Floricane varieties, and then I want to move to the Primocane varieties. I'll move through these quickly. This next one is for trialing also. It's called Squamish. It was released from the British Columbia Raspberry Plant Breeding Program. It's a Floricane fruiting cultivar used for fresh production. It's very early ripening, kind of like Cascade Premier. Really nice yields of large firm berries, really good flavor on this one. A beautiful berry, as you can see. It's susceptible to RBDV and root rot, so that's why it tends to have a little bit lower use in the Pacific Northwest, but might be a great option for Utah. And again, we're seeing good hardiness for cold in the Pacific Northwest, and this is available at Pacific Northwest nurseries. Rudy is another one I want to mention. It's a Floricane, obviously Floricane fruiting. It's early ripening a bit before Canby, so you might expect to see it ripen a couple of days before Canby starts ripening. Nice firm berries on these, excellent yields, attractive with good flavor. Again, it's susceptible to RBDV and root rot, so we have limited use here in the Pacific Northwest. The BC breeder that I talked to says he knows of a grower who's growing Rudy successfully in Edmonton, Alberta. And so that gives a little bit of an indicator of how it might perform in a cold climate and available in nurseries. This last one I am interested in your take on. This is a selection that we're calling WSU 2029. We expect to release that this year. It's an unusual selection because it is a Floricane fruiter, but it's extremely late. So it almost starts fruiting when Meeker, which is our main like mid-season commercial cultivar here in Washington, ends. So in our area, it's a cool option for filling a gap between the end of the Floricane fruiting raspberries and the beginning of the Primocane fruiting raspberries. You know, it'd be interesting to see if this would find a place in Utah production. It's extremely root rot tolerant. It has decent yields, not the best yielding one that we have, but decent, especially for that extremely late season, and it has good flavor and good firmness. Okay, and then I want to move to the Primocane fruiting options for Utah growers. And this is just a reminder slide of how Primocane fruiting varieties work. They will produce fruit at the tips of the new canes. And so we're looking at very late summer, early fall fruit. Okay, again, you have the benefit of having several great cultivar variety trials and extension publications covering trials that have been done in Utah of many cultivars. One issue with cultivars is that, you know, depending on how they're used, bought, and sold, some of them stop being propagated, and that's a choice that nurseries make. So the ones I want to talk about, I've kind of highlighted that yield bar to kind of choose which ones might be worth talking about as good options as a Primocane fruiter for Utah. So the first one I want to talk about is Polka. Polka performed really well in consumer preference trials, so the flavor is widely accepted and good. Has good yields. The berry size on Polka is average. It's a bit resistant to sunburn, but it will develop sunburn in those intense days of temperature and solar radiation. Average susceptibility to raspberry horntail. Plants of Polka are available in Eastern nurseries. You can see that the yield of all of the 10 varieties that the Utah researchers were able to test was one of the best overall. It was reliable and didn't fluctuate from year to year too much. The second Primocane variety would be Joan J. You can see on the graph that the average overall for 3 years was a bit lower than Polka, but some years it was much greater and some years it was a bit less. So Joan J had flavor that performed well in preference trials, good yields, again, a bit inconsistent depending on the year. They had large berries, fairly resistant to sunburn, with average susceptibility to the horntail. And the Joan J is available in Eastern nurseries for purchase. Okay, and then Caroline is the circled one over to the right. Caroline had lower yields overall than some of the other varieties, especially Polka and Joan J, but the yields were good. The berries are very attractive, large, and firm. The flavor was a little bit lower in terms of preference by consumers, so that's something to pay attention to. Sunburn was a bit of an issue as well, but injury by horntail was lower. Plants of Caroline, I did check and is available in nurseries. Okay, and then the next 3 slides are also of things to try out. Again, a row test or a small plot to check out new varieties is I always recommend for growers for evaluating new varieties as they come online. Mapima is a Floricane fruiting variety that was developed in New Zealand. This cultivar we don't grow a ton of Primocane fruiting cultivars in Washington, but This one is the most widely grown of the ones available in Washington, Oregon, and BC. So it's a very attractive berry. It's an early ripening berry. You get good yields. The berries are firm with good flavor. Mapima, I understand, has very thick, stout canes. And I understand that that's correlated with high horntail injury. So again, this would be something to test and evaluate to see how it performs in your area. Mapima is available in Eastern nurseries, which makes it good. And then these other two, so this, the second sort of cautiously recommended berry is finberry. This is being developed at the Oregon breeding program with the USDA ARS and Corvallis. It's higher yielding than any of the other Primocane varieties that have been developed in the Pacific Northwest. It has a really nice, attractive fruit. It's very bright colored, firm. It has a really nice balanced flavor with the sweet tart. And what's unique about finberry is that it can be harvested slightly underripe, but still retain the good sweetness and flavor of a raspberry that you would expect. Finberry was named after the plant breeder who was in Oregon, Chad Finn. He was the breeder for almost 30 years, but died in 2019. So it's neat to see some of his work coming to fruition, so to speak. The last one I want to mention is Crimson Treasure, which was released in 2018 from the New York State Ag Experimental Station with Cornell. These berries are large, firm, and bright red. They might have some cold and chilling climatic conditions that are similar to what you might experience in Utah. So again, you might have a little bit more climate response data on Crimson Treasure than from the ones from the Pacific Northwest. The berries are good flavored. They have a nice shelf life, really high yielding, and a really nice long harvest period. So again, the Primocane fruiters, they will continue to fruit from their initiation, like in late July through August and all the way into October and November, sometimes under protected culture if you can manage that. The canes are upright and self-supporting. Again, I don't know what the correlation might be with attack from the horntail pest, but one to try. Okay, with that, I'd like to close. This is a picture of my team planting some evaluation trials for new selections that we've developed on a grower field. And, our work is supported by the USDA and NIFA, the Washington Red Raspberry Commission, and the Northwest Center for Small Fruits Research. Thanks for inviting me to talk. There's my contact information if you want to get a hold of me or get more information about any of the varieties that I talked about. And then I can stay on the Q&A for a little while.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy.
No
Loved your presentation. It was a lot of fun. And Brant, did you have a question? I think I was mentioned that you might have one for Wendy. If you do, you can unmute.
I was just going to comment, Wendy, that we don't get a lot of problems with root rot unless we do a really, really bad job of irrigating. But the horntail, or sorry, the RBDV. So what are your best ones? We have had a lot of problems with bushy dwarfs. So what would be some of the new ones that are showing the best resistance there, I guess?
So we have, in terms of the Floricane fruiting, Cascade Harvest, we know is fairly resistant to getting RBDV, or at least slow to get it. Mm-hmm. Cascade Premier, we have not had any problems with it coming up in the fields, but it's also been in plantings for a shorter amount of time. So we've seen it for fewer years. So the two BC ones I mentioned do have a problem sometimes getting it. So the Squamish and the Rudy. So of the new ones that I would mention, it was the Cascade Harvest and Cascade Premier.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.